uh, with Marcus and Mark coming home to who you are.
Welcome home, Marcus. Welcome home.
Hey, it's good to be here, and I welcome you home into. It's wonderful to be in your home as well, Mark. How
Yeah,
are
and
you
to
doing?
all tuning in live or otherwise, welcome home.
Hey,
Mhm.
in grade 12, we have this unit, um, "Home Away from Home." It's uh, it's in a book called My Perspectives by Pearson, and the question was, "Is home?" I mentioned this to you before, but is home a place? Is home a person? Is home a sensation? And it's what we call our essential question. So we look at it over the whole unit as we go through these different stories and literatures. And yeah, what is home? And the answer is
Beautiful. Yeah,
an essential question doesn't. Yeah,
all
the
of the
answer is
above.
yes. It doesn't. You can't answer it, or you have to defend it from a certain place. But yeah, yeah. What I do then with the students is at the beginning, you come up with adjectives for home, and just off the top of your head, what's one or two words that come to mind when you think of home?
Yeah, we did this in the first
Yeah.
podcast. I remember we kind of
Okay. Okay.
explored that a bit, but what came for me was
Yeah.
comfort. Comfort and safety and um, um, ease,
Yes.
ease, flow. It's like a base from which you can expand and grow and stretch. That it does have that sense of like I'm grounded here, and that allows me to reach sort of outside, beyond,
Yeah.
stretch from outside of that comfort zone more when that base is
Yeah.
solid,
Yeah.
right?
Man, I'm thinking about it, and we're not meant to stay at home, just like a ship is not meant to stay at harbor, but you have to come
Yeah.
home and you have to leave. That's we're going to get into this chapter, but it's very telling of this last time when I was home in the Bahamas. I was with my father for while he was for yeah, he was going through something. He was going through treatment, and he's also helping my stepmother, my mom. I don't call her my stepmother. And this last time leaving, I had to leave to go do some stuff away, and it's the understanding. Yeah, I want you here. I want your presence, but it's also the understanding I have to go to come back, and that's what that tension is.
Mm.
Just that's what life is. It's expanding and contracting, expanding and contracting. Um, and that's what he did. He left the island to go get an education, came back. We have to go and we have to come back. We have to go and come back. Anyhow. Um,
Cool. So what are we looking at today? Beyond the home concept, which is sort of the thread that bring pulls all of this together. But we're at chapter 9 today,
yeah.
aren't we? Need a little help from our
So
friends.
in the last chapter, Kenner bombed. He failed once again. So that's about the third fail for the book. Or he learned. You either fail or you learn, or you either win or you learn. Got
Got
knocked
knocked
down.
down and he
A
got back up. Yeah.
and his friends were just like, "Hey, we could help you. Like we see what you're trying to do, and we can give some different perspective." And Kenna said, that's all good and dandy. Alex, you have your business, your startup you're trying. Rosie, you have your information for this last senior year. You're trying to put all your stuff in a pile. Only if you want to. And he invited him. He said, "Meet me at Professor Amar's office on Thursday at this time if you're down." And they rocked up. They showed up.
Sure enough, yeah, they were there.
So today we're looking at, yeah, collaboration, yet also from the inside out, knowing yourself. And that's what Professor Amar does inside this chapter. Or you can tell us about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I find it very fascinating how Professor Mars holding space for the three friends. He's not. giving direction. He's not saying, "Oh, okay, so you want to do it as a team? Well, this is how you're going to have to organize yourselves." And but he's just very curious. He stays very curious. He's like, "Oh, okay, tell me, Alex, what brings you here? What is your motivation?" And so he gives them that space to express and to share why they feel drawn into this, right? And what is it that appeals to them around these salon experiences. And so Alex shares a bit of his insight, and then Rosie shares from her perspective. And they kind of come to the conclusion that they're really committed to go forward, but that they need a little bit of structure. So they sort of reach out for help and they say, "Can you help us with a bit more structure on how we can hold, these salons over a longer period of time?" And that's when Professor Amar introduces this framework that he's been working on, the Human Potential House, which is, very close, of course, to my heart, because it is, it's sort of the central framework that we work with within being at full potential. So it's a little bit, a way to bring in aspects of myself into this story as well. But essentially, it's a framework that tries to get to the essence of the deeper human qualities that we all have within ourselves, and that when we are able to express them, we feel alive. Basically, we feel a sense of meaning and purpose and fulfillment in our life, and we're able to express more of our inner inherent and potential. So this is what Professor Amar introduces, and he shares it and gives a little bit of context to the students. And again, Alex really sees this opportunity to relaunch, I guess, the salons by introducing themselves in a deeper, more authentic way through the lens of some of these human potential dimensions or inner dimensions.
Yeah. I love Amar. He does what I believe an educator does. It says, we create the context for learning to take place. And then he lets it emerge. Because like they all came there
Yes.
and he didn't say, yeah, I have the answer. This is a framework. He's just like, what's in it for you? Not what's in it for you, but let's explore you. Let's explore you. Let's explore you. And then, yeah, Kenna was like, well, we need a framework. Well, not we need a framework, but how do we do this? And he's like, here. And here's the beautiful thing about the framework. They fill it in with themselves, right?
Yeah. 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 It's this playground, right? It's kind of like a playground, and you can bring it to life in so many different ways. And they sort of immediately sense into, oh, wait, we could use this to introduce ourselves, right? Maybe there's one or two of these 23 dimensions that are more connected to our journey and what speaks to us in this moment, and we can use that as a way to share something about ourselves. So the rest of the chapter is, again, Amar giving them the opportunity to reveal a little bit more about what they would want to say about themselves.
I love the 23 rooms, because that's the same thing inside the houses are 23, and inside the inner IDGs there are also 23, and inside our book there were 23 chapters, and inside the human chromosomes there are 23. And it was all by chance. I asked you about that. I said, did you mean to do that?
Yeah, yeah, by chance or by serendipity,
Yeah,
synchronicity.
divine alignment.
But definitely it wasn't pre-planned. It wasn't like, oh, we need to have
Yeah,
23 chapters,
yeah.
right? And it wasn't, we need to have 23 dimensions to this framework. It just happened that, that's how it took shape.
So, and hey, whatever emerges, you rock with whatever emerges. Um, the three students exchanged excited glances. They now had a map to unlock the unexplored potential that lay within each of them. So again, the map is not the territory. So the territory they've yet to explore, but now they had a map or a compass, a guide, whereas they can go out and do it. What did they find while they
Mm.
were in there? We were talking about that before the podcast started. Two.
Yeah, I mean, for Kenna, it was very much awareness. Like individual awareness is one of the qualities in that framework, and he was drawn to that because he really felt that he needed to understand more about who he is at the essence, right, at the core, because it's only with that awareness that he can translate that into doing, because that was the other dimension, was doing from
Hmm.
being. But if you're going to do from a place of deeper being, it implies that you need to know what that being is. Like, who am I? What am I being? To allow
I don't.
his doing, his very conditioning.
Oh man, you froze there just for a hot second for me.
Did I
Can,
freeze? Yeah, sorry.
can you take that back for
I,
5 seconds? I'm sorry.
yeah, I was saying that, the tension that Kenneth feels is that his doing, so his actions, the way he's showing up, everything is
Hmm.
coming from a place of conditioning, right?
Mm.
He's not really aware of why he's making certain choices and decisions in his life. It's more because that's just the way that it has always been. And I think what he's yearning for is to have more clarity on who he is at the core, his being, so that he can allow that to inform his doing, right? So doing from a place of being is something that is very important to him, and he shares a little bit the story from that place.
Can I share some perspective on that?
Yeah.
Because I mean, I totally align with we have to express from our experience or do from our being. Yeah. Um, Two ideas come up. One is I believe there's an immutable part of us. I call it the divine. That is, it, it's all found in all faith traditions, but in specifically Christianity, it's called the fruit of the spirit. But it's love, joy, peace, kindness, gentleness, and all that, right? And I believe that is with all character, everybody. My understanding is the virtues in action is another way of saying it, or the 23 houses, or as you say,
Rooms. Yeah.
the 23 rooms. And like you said, there's a conditioning layer on top of that. So I think there's a being that's always there.
Yeah.
And then there's some, like with pho noodles, you add the different spices that flavor it as you wish.
Yeah.
And I feel those shift with our life experience. So there are two layers of being to know.
Yeah.
It's like, who are you in the shared humanity? And who are you in this contextual space time stamp right here?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's well put. Yeah. Yeah. And it gets confusing, right? It can be very fuzzy and so getting to that clarity, I think, is really what Kenna is yearning for, is to be able to be in touch a bit more with that source, right? Source identity, his deeper core.
Hmm.
And his friends see it in him. I think that's always the case, right? It's always easier to see that essence in another person than it is in yourself. But he's on that journey, and I think this is a big step for him.
I, I, I think it's easy to see in other people because it's the universe experiencing itself. It is a universe seeing itself, and it's like, no, yeah, that is me, and that's the essence that I want to express. So it's an invitation to all of us. Yeah, dig deep into that and create spaces where others can express that, just as Amar does. The greatest gift you can give to somebody is an awareness of themselves.
Yeah,
And if that divine being is always there, it's always speak to that. Always
yeah,
speak to that love. Always speak to that peace. Always speak to that joy.
yeah,
Okay. Let me
yeah,
get off my apple.
yeah, and this sort of goes in the direction of what Kenna then says, right? Because when Alex introduces this idea, Amar is very supportive of it. He's like, "Wow, yeah, that's it. That's great. That sounds very powerful." And Kenna has a little bit of a pullback, saying, "Well, isn't that too personal? Right?
Mm.
Don't we risk it being too personal?" Um, and I love what Amar says. Is he says that it's the
Keep going.
personal that makes it powerful, right? It is the personal that makes it powerful. It is the personal that allows other people to also open up and share their essence, right? It's an invitation to others to also be able to enter into that space of more depth, right? The depth.
We talked about this earlier too. You're about the word intimacy and getting to know oneself.
Yeah.
Yeah, the personal does make it powerful. Yet you have to, in Brene Brown's words, be vulnerable. And to be vulnerable means to open yourself up.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think if you have that underlying understanding of the spirit, or there's nothing that can harm me, that's
Yeah.
where you open up and you just share. The personal makes it powerful. What's up?
And what impact does that have, Marcus, on your collaborators or the people that show up to these salons, right? When they're in the presence of that energy, what does it do uh, to the collective?
Yeah.
How does it shift things?
Well, I'm reflecting on my time in Korea, or in my time in different international places presenting. And when I think of the personal makes it powerful, there's this guy named Kenneth Burke. He's a communicator. He said, "There's no persuasion without identification." And it's when I can see myself in you, or we have a shared story, that it's like, okay, you understand me a bit more.
Mm,
Speaking about our collaborative process,
mm,
it's by sharing your story that I understood you a bit. And in our first meeting, we explained some of our story, and
mm,
then it unveiled and unraveled as different projects we've worked on.
mm,
But as you get to know a person, you get to also understand how they handled other problems.
mm,
You get to understand how they overcame. Um, Problems might arise, and it's just like, okay, the past is not an indication of the future, but it holds patterns, and it's like, okay, how are we going to get over this? It makes you feel. It takes a little bit of guessing work out, so you can trust more. Now, mind you, discernment is also a character strength, and you have to be able to. And that comes with wisdom, taking time of understanding what people want, the means by which they get it, and then the actions they take. They could want something in their heart, but not take the actions. I don't know. That's a whole nother layer deeper. But when you're authentic from the stage, you're inviting the audience to say, hey, this is the common ground where we can start this conversation.
yeah. I see myself in your story. I feel myself in your story. I think what authentic stories do is it opens that space of shared humanity. It's
Mm,
like you enter a realm of where you realize that at the core we actually go through a lot of the same rites of passages.
hmm
The context might be different, but the journey, right? The hero's journey is very similar, and you start to see that there's a shared um, human experience that we're having
mm,
beyond the surface level differences. And I think that that's what authentic storytelling and sharing does. Is it kind of goes. The audience or the people there in the presence go like, yeah, I recognize something in that. They're speaking to a truth within me as well that I maybe haven't been able to express yet,
yeah.
but through their expression, I'm also able to give words to it, right? I'm also able to now bring it more to the surface. And I think that's a beautiful sort of um, loop that happens, right? Like a Mobius, where it kind of each one feeds off each other, and something new sort of comes forward.
Y- Beyond having a shared experience, also, there's a unique experience that gives perspective. Give you an example, if I have a friend who's a child, a refugee as a child soldier. It's not my lived experience, but it gives me a perspective of this is what the mind goes through under oppression to do certain things, and it's just,
Yeah.
oh, I would have never experienced that, but from his authenticity,
Yeah.
I now have an experience of or a perspective of life.
Yeah. You can open your heart much more to, those types of events and struggles, and um, you can see things through a new light. Of course, definitely. Yeah.
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 Let's in our time remaining explore Rosie's inner space.
Yeah.
You brought that up. Want
Yeah.
me to
So
set the context,
she's
or are you? Yeah.
she's talking about play, and what was the other one that was important to her?
Something in regards, maybe it is authentic story, but it's her her spiritual expression.
Yeah.
She feels in Germany is one way, and in the Bahamas is another. Um, you have the text right there in front of
Yeah, I
you.
have it here. It's trust. Okay.
Okay.
Trust and play.
Okay.
Um, and I think the trust here, maybe I'll just read it out here. Uh, so she's saying, growing up between the Bahamas and Germany, um, I learned to carefully navigate which parts of myself to share. For example, back in Nassau, my grandmother is religious and spirituality is a large part of my identity. I'm deeply connected to it. However, here in Switzerland, I feel less comfortable expressing that part of myself. I'd love to develop more trust in myself and in expressing my relationship to God and what it means to me. Not trying to convert anyone, obviously. Rather, this is who I am.
Hmm. Yeah. Writing that into the book, while that's not my lived experience, I understand it and I can empathize with it at a conceptual level. Like, I understand people who don't want to share their faith belief in public spaces, and especially in Europe, or parts of Europe, where it may not be as readily accepted in places where it's more widespread. Um, hmm. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's interesting that she's connecting this to trust, right?
Okay.
Because I think what she's saying is that um, trust that the cultural differences that I feel are not as important as my mind may be telling me they are.
Mm.
Right? So these are stories we tell ourselves. Oh, I'm in Switzerland. Oh, I'm in Europe. Therefore I need to be careful, sharing about my beliefs, my faith. That's something I need to keep more to myself.
Hmm.
And I think what she's saying is like, no, just trust that if I show up in my authenticity, and that's part of my authenticity,
Hmm.
that, you know, it's not coming from a place of trying to persuade anyone or convert anyone or anything like that. It's just like, this is who I am. This is part of my culture, and it's part of how I grew up, and it's part of what makes me me, right? So
Yeah.
there's a level of trusting that, there's not that the context is not as rigid as we may think it is, or tell
So,
ourselves it is.
and that's wisdom speaking, Mark, right? With your salt and pepper, as we've often alluded to. Um, the way I understand Rosie there, so just personally from my own upbringing, um, it was never an overbearing religious context. It was a spiritually full context, and that's through even in high school, and then I went to a university, and then I went into the mission field. But it was a wholesome environment. It was never overbearing, right?
Mhm.
With an adolescent or a teenager who grew up in an experience like that, again, this is not my experience. When they go into something that is other, they're not sure how it will be received. And especially at adolescence where you're individuating, but you're finding your peace in peer groups, you don't want to disrupt the peer group. My peer group
Mhm.
was always filled with spiritually minded friends.
Mhm.
And again, not dogmatic people, but it was just people who felt comfortable in their religion and speaking about God. But I could understand how she's just like, I don't know how this would be received. So that's why she's apprehensive. And I understand a young person because I've actually spoken to missionaries of other faiths and beliefs. And actually, I remember when I was in Saudi Arabia, how I think is if your higher power and greater force is about the well being of others, there's, of course, that's wisdom speaking, looking back, but I'm just like, there's no greater privilege than to be who you are. Like, do that. And I had to encourage them. Again, it's a gradient. There's some people who they said they want to go off and fight the war against whatever and whatnot. And I said, yeah, let's sit down and reason and think this through. I can't make any choices for you, but tell me why you want to do this. But again, it's accepting them fully and let them understand if your God is the creator of this, or if the well, like it accepts you as well. You are the universe experiencing yourself. I may not use those terms, but it's just like, yeah, you're accepted. I don't know.
Hmm.
Hmm. Not I don't
Yeah,
know, but that's how I
it's
approach it.
it's a different level of trust, I think, you know?
A trust in what? Talk to me about that.
Well, it's a different level of trust, you know, the universe experiencing itself, right? That in itself is like a very different way of thinking about who we are, why are we here, right? And I think what's behind that is a sense of you know, surrendering to something beyond ourselves, right? Like stepping into a space where you know we don't need to control everything, right? Our lives are, if we flow with what is unfolding, it's a very different way of living than to say like I need to get this and then that and then that and that's the path to success and this is kind of, but rather pay attention to the signs, you know, flow with what is unfolding, what is emerging, be in connection to who we are, what are we being called to do as a next step, right? So it's a, and I feel like that's where Rosie is on her journey, right? Is trying, or not trying, but opening up to that. And that's the
Mhm.
trust. And it's like I'm I'm perfect the way I am, you know, just feel free, right? Feel free to, and play was the other dimension. So there's
Yeah.
an element of just play with it, right? Experiment, play with it. So I feel like that's where she's coming from.
You know, I look forward to seeing how this book is used in classes. Um, the future of education is going to look very different with AI, and like we're saying this in wisdom at people who've experienced life looking back. It's easy to say. It's very easy to say, but with all the screens and with all the like lack of critical thinking that may come, how do we create the context for our kids to still think critically, think, not be threatened by it? Um, I don't know. Like I'm curious to see that, and only time will tell.
I
But
think conversation, right? Dialogue
yeah,
like this. It would be amazing, right? To have these types of spaces in the classroom to be able to bring up these types of topics, you know, that we're playing with
yet
on the, you know, by chapter.
yes, and conversations. It's a big part of it. Socratic seminars and fishbowl conversations. That's what we did in our class. And doing in the community, like collaborative
Project,
efforts,
project-based
projects,
learning. Yeah.
sustainable project-based living.
Yeah.
That's what businesses are at a local level. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, that topic is going to come up later in the book, I'm sure, you know, when, well, I won't give it away now, but it's going to come up later in the book. And I think that is indeed a really important component,
Mm.
is how to actualize, right, what we're discovering about ourselves into specific projects, ways of contributing to society, to community. And yeah, a very fascinating space for sure.
It moves through three steps: awareness, understanding, and then action.
Yeah,
Yeah. Boom.
yeah,
Well, let's get there fast and take it slow.
yeah,
Um, our next chapter is chapter 10, where mask off in a cafe. That's actually where they start their discussion, their first salon. All right.
yeah. Masks off.
Mask off in the cafe. Mark, this has been a wonderful time together, always discussing these characters, discussing us as characters, and hopefully crafting. We still have work to do on the book, but crafting an understanding that we can have some more characters out in the world doing some awesomeness.
Totally looking forward to it, Marcus. Always a pleasure.
Okay. To the audience watching, welcome home. Welcome home.